So this is going to be actually a rather bizarre topic, and I say bizarre because it responded to this message I got on social media and the person blocked me. So I don't know if they're watching this or not, but they dared me to make a video on this because, and it's really bizarre. I can't follow their logic, is why I use the term bizarre to describe the situation at hand. But they send me this. There's a group that I participate in online with AA members in it. I don't go there very often because I don't have the time nor the patience to argue with a bunch of AA members, but I do go there occasionally just to see what the action is in terms of the debates that happen between AA and anti-AA people. But this guy sends me this documentary about the homelessness problem in the city of Seattle. And he tells me, if you can sit and watch this all the way through, I dare you to look anybody in the face and say AA doesn't work. I dare you to say Salvation Army is a bad organization. I dare you to even think about saying that decriminalizing drugs is a good thing. I mean, you probably don't have the courage to make a video on this, and you don't have the courage to talk about it, or you'll say the documentary is overblown and exaggerated. I love it how they know what I'm going to say. Have you ever noticed how in AA they always have a tendency to tell you what you really think, what you really feel, and what you really want? You don't want to do this step because you're afraid of this. You drink again because you think this. They're like the fucking psychic hotline already with all their insider knowledge as to how every member and every alcoholic or everybody, I don't use the term alcoholic, everybody that's got a problem with drugs and alcohol, how they really think. But I'm a little bit bewildered as to how this documentary is supposed to make me ashamed to say AA doesn't work, and how it's supposed to make me ashamed to say the Salvation Army is an actual recognized church that can actually terminate you if you work for them and you can't get unemployment because they don't have to follow the state laws in any state that I'm aware of, or how the Salvation Army rehab program is a bunch of bullshit, or how I'm supposed to look people in the face and say that the drug courts don't work after watching this fucking documentary. What even makes it more hysterically amusing to me is that I looked up Seattle, because I don't know anything about Seattle. I've never been to Seattle, I've never lived in Seattle, so I don't pretend to understand the issues with the local government there or whatnot. But Seattle has a Salvation Army. In fact, they have several Salvation Army setups there. I looked it up on the internet. Seattle has AA meetings all over the place. The very first search result I found when I was looking at Seattle drug treatment centers brought me up like 9 treatment centers in the Seattle area alone, not to mention the ones in Kings County. So AA and Salvation Army and drug court, they're already there. As a matter of fact, I found an article that said Seattle got a specialized drug court program, a federal one, in the year 2012, and this documentary is in 2019, which is saying that drug court hasn't done anything to solve the problem with drugs and alcohol. There's a few issues I do have with the documentary, but I do want to say something in this video before I forget about it completely. Anytime someone tries to shame you with this moral high ground bullshit, I would say just totally ignore that completely. I dare you to look in the faces of people and say AA doesn't work. Well, I could turn that around. I could turn that around completely and say, I dare you to look at the family members that have died as a result of drinking and drugging and tell them that it's by the grace of God you didn't die and they did. This emotional rhetoric that's designed to make you feel like you should be ashamed for having a different opinion or a different outlook or a different perspective because there's some emotional appeal thrown into it is bullshit. I would go so far as to say that people who do that, who engage in that type of this moral high ground crap are actually far less moral than the person that's being shamed over saying something. What you're really saying is, how dare you not think just like me? That's what they're really saying when they throw that shit at you. So ignore that if people ever try to use that. Don't feel ashamed. Now, to get on to the documentary, there's a couple of things I'm going to point out here, and I'm not minimizing homelessness being a problem, okay? I drove a cab in New York, okay, at one point, a long time before, right at the turn of the century, and I don't pretend to know the situation in New York City today. I haven't been there in a long time, but I know about homelessness. Just like the city where I live right now has a homeless problem. Okay, there are certain gas stations that I don't stop at because somebody's going to come up to you and somebody's going to try to get money off of you. And they're not always very nice about it either. There have been a couple of traffic lights in a certain part of the city where I'm living at right now where people will just come up and beat on your window and demand money or whatever. I remember when I was almost borderline homeless in this city and I didn't have a driver's license and I was at a bus stop and I was waiting on my bus, and I got to where I really hated going to bus stops because somebody would come up and harass you, and they weren't nice about it either. It wasn't like, do you think you could give me some spare change? It was somebody put their hand on my shoulder and actually spun me around and demanded I give them $20. You know, the most recent encounter I had was something like this. The guy asked me for a cigarette, and I'm a smoker, so naturally if you want a cigarette, I'll give you a cigarette. And I handed him the cigarette, and he gives me this real ugly look, and he says, well, you know, I can't buy a meal with a fucking cigarette. And I was like, well, you're not going to get shit off of me now. I mean, you're going to act towards me like that. But one thing in this documentary, it says in one point, they're interviewing this homeless person, and they say 100% of everybody is homeless in Seattle because of the drug problem. 100% because it's the drugs. Every single homeless person in Seattle is hooked on drugs. Okay, that doesn't line up with reality, and just because some person said it, certainly don't fucking make it true. I've seen homelessness. I know what homelessness is, and there are a lot of people who are homeless because of drug addictions. There's no doubt about that. There's also a lot of people homeless because they're down on their luck. There's people who are homeless that are mentally ill. There are people that are homeless because the mental institutions in this country closed all over the place 20, 30 years ago. And you see them wandering the streets all the time. I've seen people that, you know, in New York, where I'm living now, everywhere else, that were just totally out of touch with reality. I can't say that has anything to do with drugs whatsoever. You see them all the time near where I work, walking around, talking to themselves, and they don't even seem to be trying to panhandle. They're in a different reality whatsoever. Can't say it's all drug related. So there's a little bit of a faulty bit of logic here, but it goes through these scenes of Seattle neighborhoods that are all shit. It goes through the fact that certain crimes in Seattle aren't punished any longer. Like, you know, you have a lot of business owners interviewed that are talking about people coming to their shops and they piss on the floors and they steal and they walk back out and nothing is done about it. And there is another scene where and I don't know if that's the current mayor of Seattle or not. This is 2019 when this thing was done. But all these outraged people are talking about the homeless problem that's out of control. And he tells them, well, you should call the police, which really pisses everybody off because obviously the police are either, there's not enough police or there's not enough whatever the situation is with the city resources to actually do anything about it. Now, of course, the person who sent me the message before blocking me, who said I wouldn't have the courage to do a video about this, tried to claim that more laws are needed. Okay, if the laws that you've already got on the books aren't working, okay, you said something about decriminalizing drugs. You know, you dare me to say decriminalizing drugs is a good thing. Well, drugs are criminal right now in the very city that you're using as a point for this documentary, and yet it doesn't seem to be solving the problem. So by passing more laws, what exactly do you want to have happen? I mean, do you want all these people rounded up and taken to wherever, out of sight, out of mind? Is that what you're really aiming at here with this? Because you have a Salvation Army, you have drug courts, you have treatment centers, and you have AA in Seattle, and none of those things are solving the current problem. You don't even have a fucking argument to make with me. Okay, you might have some ground to stand on if the city in question that you're referring to, I'm guessing you live there, I don't know, if they had removed all the drug courts, if they had decriminalized all the drugs, if they had done away with the Salvation Army, if they had done all of that, and this problem was a result, you might have potentially some kind of ground to stand on. But you're using a city as an example that has a drug court, that has AA treatment centers, that has the Salvation Army, and you're saying that somehow or the other, it's people like me who say none of that shit works. That's the fucking problem. Apparently, I could turn that around and say that, well, the city of Seattle's in the shape it's in because people aren't getting the adequate treatment they need, that these drug courts, these treatment centers, and these AA meetings aren't doing jack shit. Now, there's no scientific basis for me making that statement because homelessness, the problem of homelessness, which has been with us for a very long time in the nation we live in, has way more factors behind it than just simple drug use alone. I mean, I don't have a whole stack or a mountain of evidence or scientific evidence to talk about what all causes homelessness outside of, basic economics or things that are going bad or an economic recession or a downturn or whatever is happening. And I can't pretend to know what's going on in Seattle. Never been there, never lived there, but to pretend that I don't know anything about homelessness is really laughable if you knew anything about me at all. And there's a scene in the documentary where they're interviewing these people from out of town who come from these small communities. There's one couple from this small town in Tennessee, and they're saying, are you shocked by what you're seeing here? Are you really shocked by what you're seeing here? Which is fucking misleading. Of course they're going to be shocked, and they're like, yeah, nothing like this ever happens where we're from. Well, of course it doesn't. Look, if I took an ordinary family from some tiny little town in South Dakota somewhere, when I put them in one of the worst inner city environments that existed in this country, pick whichever city you would like, and I said, are you shocked by what you're seeing here? The chances are probably 99% that they're going to say, yeah, this is pretty shocking. I'm glad I live in Pleasantville, South Dakota. Doesn't prove, I'm not sure exactly what you're trying to prove with this. Are you trying to prove that there's a homeless problem in the inner cities, but yet somehow AA works? Has the 12 steps fried your brain so much that you can't even see that that's the most illogical basis for what exactly? I don't even know. You blocked me before I could respond to you. You blocked me before I could say so. Because Seattle's got a homelessness problem, that proves that somehow or the other I should be ashamed for saying AA doesn't work. When in fact, the idea that Seattle has all of the very facilities that I rail against in these videos and still has this out-of-the-way homeless problem would indicate actually that my point of view is correct, that the treatment centers and the Salvation Armies and the AA meetings and the drug courts aren't doing shit for people with drug problems. There's a little section in the documentary where they show these people, they've been arrested multiple times. There's one guy, he's like made the top of the list for the number of arrests in the city of Seattle for his meth problem. And he's kind of, wow, cool. I'm number one at something. I'm number one at getting arrested in the city. And I've started stealing from my drug addiction. And it makes me feel pretty surreal and pretty cool that I'm doing this. Okay, what is your answer, the guy who's sending me this fucking thing? What is your answer for that problem? Your answer is to send them to treatment? Your answer is to send them to drug court? Oh, wait, that already exists. And as far as some of these comments on the video itself, I won't answer every single one of them, but, these people all need to be sent to the Salvation Army. Well, let me tell you something about the Salvation Army. If you rounded up all these people with some armed, organized troop and force, and you put them all in the Salvation Army would throw out about 90% of them after a few nights and keep their personal belongings because they wouldn't stop doing what they're doing. The Salvation Army would treat these people like shit, the ones who managed to hang on and survive it, which many wouldn't. Many would run away. And the few who did would be right back out on the streets within a few months, and they would go right back to doing what they're doing. So you're really literally putting a Band-Aid on a wound and claiming to me that this is some kind of solution and that I shouldn't talk about how it's not a solution. So you kind of made a case against yourself by sending me this fucking thing. And I don't know if you're watching or not. If you are watching, since you dared me to make a video about that, I just have to say you're a goddamn moron. It's one of these things that's really too ridiculous to make an entire subject matter video on. I mean, I've reiterated the very point that I set out to make about 4 or 5 times. I can't really reiterate it enough, but I will ask this. If you live in the Seattle area and you live in this particular situation where this guy is claiming that there's just armed camps of homeless people all on drugs, and the answer is hey, chime in on the comments and let me know what you think the issue is and what should be done about it. Anyway, until next time.